Hello and welcome to It's Personal, the podcast which explores how to put the citizen at the heart of public service transformation. I'm Jess, the co-editor-in-chief of Civil Service World.
And I'm Jo, a partner at KPMG focusing on customer transformation.
Now, Jo, HMRC interacts with pretty much every adult in the UK at some point, which means that the scale of the customer experience challenge they're dealing with is unlike almost any other organisation, either in the public sector or the private sector. Where do you even start with something like that?
It's a really interesting question. And actually, one of the things that comes through strongly in the conversation that you're about to hear is that HMRC has actually started thinking about customer experience. In fact, it's been on a journey for some years. It's thinking about it in some quite specific and ambitious ways. There's a lot going on inside the organisation that I think would actually surprise people.
Indeed, there is, which tees me up really nicely to tell you that in today's episode, we're going to be speaking to Claire Walsh, who is HMRC's Director of Customer Experience, and John Swift, who leads the Industry, Innovation and External Learning team within Claire's Directorate.
So Claire and John are going to talk us through all about what they've been doing to fix the entire end-to-end customer journey and take all of that into account, not just individual touch points. And on top of that, John's also going to talk us through the transformation of the bereavement service.
Yeah, that was a really interesting part of the discussion. We're also going to get into kind of some quite difficult stuff for HMRC, like the fact that the Institute for Customer Service, they did a survey and HMRC came bottom of all the public sector organisations this year. So we asked Claire and John what they made of that.
Right. And what I think you'll find is that rather than deflecting that pain, they're leaning into it. So let's hear what they had to say.
Welcome to It's Personal, Claire and John. Thank you so much for being with us. I wanted to start by asking you both a bit about yourselves and your career and what you each do within HMRC. Claire, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Well, first of all, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm a director in HMRC and I'm responsible for customers' experience of us as a tax authority. I've been in HMRC for a long time.
How long?
Pretty much all my career. So it's
wow.
approaching 30 years. But yeah, in the last 10 months, I've been in this director role. And I say to my team and anybody that will listen, it really is the best job in the world.
And John, you are a member of that team, presumably?
I am indeed. So I work in Claire's Customer Experience Directorate. I head up a team called the Industry, Innovation and External Learning team. So we're all about going out, speaking to external organisations, whether that's sort of large multinationals, whether it's much smaller startups, trying to find out what they're doing in the CX space, trying to understand where they've got things right, mistakes they might have made along the way, and where possible to try and bring that learning back into HMRC. In terms of my career, I have worked in a lot of different departments, doing a lot of different things over the years. I've travelled to some very interesting and some less interesting places throughout my career. I won't go into where they all are. I've been working in the customer experience space for about 12 or 13 years now.
Great.
So Claire, let's begin with, it's a known fact, isn't it, that HMRC interacts with pretty much every adult in the UK at some point. Yeah. And when you think about the scale of the customer experience that's being delivered, what does getting it right actually mean? What does it look like?
So it's a great question, but actually I think the answer is really simple for me. So we have a customer charter, the HMRC charter. It began life, I think, in 2012. We did it in 2019. It's published. It's there for customers to see. We use it a lot internally. And it's really simple. It has 7 commitments. And they're really simple commitments like, we're going to make things easy. We're going to be right first time. We're going to be responsive. We're going to keep customers' data secure. Those things are really simple for everyone to understand internally and externally. Of course, we're not unique in having a customer charter. And I think of all of those commitments, it's as simple as make things easy. If customers can pay their tax, doesn't matter whether they're individuals, small business, bigger businesses, if customers can pay their tax easily, they will do so. more people will pay the taxes that then drive public service. So for me, yes, it's a huge scale, Jo, but the answer is simple, and we need to be delivering those easy tax services.
In terms of actual measurement, I guess I'm keen to understand the pragmatics of that, but also how you've moved with the times, like given customer expectations change and evolve all the time. How do you keep up with those times in what you're measuring?
So it's a really good challenge, right? And we're all customers of lots of organisations. Expectations are growing every day. Actually, we have more expectations, higher expectations of other organisations. The same is exactly true of a tax authority. And so we measure in a number of different ways. So like lots of organisations, we have an annual survey. It goes out to thousands of customers every year in the autumn. We get the results back, we act on that survey. So that's the sort of top line annual relationship survey. We also measure interactions. So we have telephony surveys, we have surveys on our app and on our website. We can kind of look at it from the sort of top angle in terms of that relationship survey and also at each interaction point. What we haven't had until recently, but I'm really proud that we've got it now, is we can see what's happening across the whole customer journey. Mm-hmm. So we can now see not just those individual touch points, but what's happening from the moment a customer interacts in the way that they choose to interact and whether actually that journey is working really well or not for the customer. And what we're now doing in HMRC is we're triangulating all of that. And that will begin to give us a much richer source of data and insight that will really drive those easy experiences. So we're not there yet, Jo. I'm not going to sit here and say all our services are easy, but we now start to have the data that allows us to drive that ease into the organisation for our customers.
With those customer journeys, what does success look like? You mentioned getting it right first time. What does a successful customer journey look like?
Let me just tell you a little bit about where we've been in terms of customer journey mapping. So we learnt from other organisations probably 10 years or so ago about the art of customer journey mapping. And for listeners, some people say to me, well, it's just process mapping. So when you map a bunch of processes, they're the internal processes that you're utilising. When you map customer journeys, you're really mapping it from a customer's perspective. What are they actually experiencing when they're having to interact with those processes? And you can say it's two sides of the same coin, but actually you often see quite different things from your customer journey maps to your process maps. So we learned how to do it. We have been mapping and doing a really good job of mapping whole customer journeys for the last few years. And what we're really looking for is where things are going wrong.
Yeah.
But we've now moved on. So we've learnt from lots of other organisations, especially those in the financial services, who tell us where you need to get to is customer journey optimisation.
Okay.
So you need to not just be mapping and then hoping that across the organisation you're going to fix. You need to be applying a methodology to fix those points. And we're now doing that across 12 important customer journeys in HMRC, and we're seeing real results. Now, obviously, HMRC has got an awful lot more than 12 journeys, but, we're starting with 12, and over time we will scale that approach.
Coming full circle back to the dashboard that you were describing across relationship, end-to-end journeys and interaction, that's such a powerful tool to enable you to enrich the orchestration of it.
And within the next 3 months, I'm delighted to say we're going to have a customer dashboard.
Yeah, great.
So for the whole organisation, it will be viewable. It will show customer experience across those triangulated metrics. I think that journey data is really pivotal to getting those easy journeys so that customers can comply.
And John, I believe that you've done quite a bit of work on the bereavement journey for customers. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So about 2 years ago, we decided, look, we're going to completely restructure our services that we offer for bereaved customers. It's a really difficult time for everyone, probably for a lot of customers, the most difficult time. And you don't want to be having a horrible experience with any organisation. So we started off by doing a lot of mapping of our internal processes, which Claire had talked about before, and they were unbelievably complicated. There were thousands of different processes across the entire sort of gamut of potential journeys that customers could go through. And a lot of them didn't line up. And all of these processes, they've been put in place for really good reasons at different times, but they just didn't quite line up. So we first of all mapped these, and it covered an enormous wall. I think the wall was something like 20 feet wide by 8 feet high. And we were just using little post-it
like a
notes.
physical wall, an actual wall.
Physically mapped these out on the wall. We didn't have enough space for post-it notes on this enormous wall because there was so many different interaction points. But then, as Claire just mentioned before, we started to then overlay that with, okay, what should the customer journey be? And we started with a, relatively speaking, simple customer journey. And we started to identify, okay, where are the particular touch points? Why is this happening? And for some of them, okay, there was very good reasons. We're like, okay, there's a legal requirement. We have to do something a particular way. What can we then do to try and smooth that? For others, there just wasn't a good reason. Or if there was, it had been lost in the mists of time. We even had some occasions where there wasn't like a digital process, and one person would have to physically pick up a piece of paper and go and hand it to somebody else. Like, well, this is absolutely crazy. A customer shouldn't have to put up with this, particularly at such a difficult time. So we mapped all of this out and then identified, look, what are the things we can do to make it better for our customers, and started working through that. And then at the same time, started thinking about, okay, well, actually, it's going to impact on our staff as well. It's really important for them that they can give this really good, empathetic experience for customers. We looked at how are they working? Do they have rotation? Because actually it can be quite emotionally draining when
if you're just on the bereavement team all the time. Yeah.
Exactly. There was better training put in place. They had rotation systems put in place. They had a lot more support. So actually, once we'd worked through all of these touch points, we'd made the service better for customers. We also then put in all of these different support mechanisms for staff as well, all of which has made for hopefully a much better, easier and smoother journey for customers going through bereavement. And it's not perfect. We would be the first to admit it, but it's so much better than where we were 2 years ago. And the team's constantly improving. They're not saying, okay, great, we've sorted this.
Job done. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, okay, well, we made all of these improvements. How can we carry on doing it?
And actually, we didn't do it for this purpose. We did it for our customers and our colleagues. But HMRC won an award. We won an Institute of Customer Service award earlier this year, and we're proud of that.
What was the name of the award?
It was for Customer Service Changemaker. So it's for Jane Bryan, who heads up the bereavement service team.
Yeah. It's nice to be recognised where things go well.
I think there's also quite a useful kind of benchmarking function almost to external recognition. It's saying, okay, do you know what? You're kind of getting this broadly right. It's in line with what external organisations are doing. So that's a sort of maybe a positive validation, you could say, of some of the things that we are doing. Okay, in these areas, we're broadly on the right track. But also then that kind of shows us, okay, where else do we need to be looking? Where else do we need to be making improvements?
Well, and actually, the Institute of Customer Services, we work really closely with them, don't we? But they challenge us as well. In their annual survey this year, we were deeply disappointed to be the bottom of public sector organisations.
Oh, gosh.
Right? And we were, because we were working really hard to create a service culture, to really drive those customer experiences, but we're at the bottom. And actually, I think as head of customer experience, working on customer experience, even if we're at the top, we'd still be driving for better, wouldn't we? We'd still want to be never comfortable.
Yeah.
But, that survey reminds us that we've got a way to go. We are going to do better.
It's fascinating. I think when we spoke to Jim Harrer, we asked him, about the kind of figure of the taxman in society. People feel resentful when they have to part with their money. So I think maybe some of it might be just the very nature of what HMRC does.
I accept that, but I think we've got an education approach in HMRC. We've just gone live with Tax Confident that's principally aimed at small businesses and pensioners at the moment, but we'll be growing it. But, for me, I think we need to be even clearer with our customers that they are directly paying for the public services they're using.
Yeah.
So you've both mentioned that learning from others is really important to you, and that's come out loud and clear. And just really keen to understand a little bit more about that, Claire, in terms of how you're looking to industry, other government departments, whether that's best in class customer experiences in the private or the public sector. Do you think that that kind of openness and willingness to learn is a recent shift for HMRC? And if so, what's driven it?
It is a personal commitment of mine to learn from everybody I can. In the last 18 months, I have been to multiple private sector organisations that are leading the way in terms of the Institute of Customer Service Index. I have talked to multiple tax authorities. I've recently come back actually from a visit to the Canadian Tax Authority, the Canadian Revenue Authority. And I think my job there is to work out what's translatable to HMRC. So lots of examples of where we've done that. And some of examples that, where we've gone, not now. Now's not the right time to do this. But we've still logged that learning. I think what we're doing is we're building on our experience of the past and saying, actually, we have customers like every other organisation. And those customers expect the same of us as they expect from other organisations. And therefore, whilst we are unique in one sense as a tax authority, we're not unique generally. And we need to be serving those customers in the way they're expecting. And I think that moment means that we really need to be listening more and more and learning more and more and translating that to the best of our ability. So yeah, absolute personal commitment, absolutely driven by it. And I have personally learned huge amounts that we're now putting into the organisation.
That's really interesting. I could ask about 7 follow-up questions to that, but I'm gonna crack on with my next question because it intrigued me. I read that you have held things like a Dragon's Den style event with industry. What made you choose that kind of setup, and what came out of that a more conventional approach might have missed?
We hold lots of regular engagement forums with all sorts of cross sections of industry and voluntary community sector, which I've mentioned before. I always like to try and bring in, actually, it's not just private sector organisations we're speaking with. Part of the reason for going with the Dragon's Den theme, actually, it caught people's imagination a little bit. It was a little bit provocative, a little bit of fun. Whenever we have these sessions with externals, we always run them under Chatham House rules. So we won't attribute specific comments or ideas or experiences to a particular organisation or individual unless they say, look, they're happy for you to say we did this. It tends to be more on the when we got something right, people tend to be really happy to attribute that. But because we run them under Chatham House rules, actually we learn an awful lot more where people are a lot more open about, do you know what, we did this and we got it badly wrong, or actually this didn't work how we expected it to. So when we had the Dragon's Den event, we had lots of different tables with industry reps and people from other government departments all sitting down, chewing over HMRC problems, but actually ones that resonated with everyone in the room. They weren't specific to HMRC.
Could you give an example of one of the problems?
We were talking, there was all sorts of things. We were talking about digital transformation. We were talking about culture shift. How do you take your staff along with you? I mean, all the types of things that any organisation would be quite familiar with. And then each table had to get up and essentially pitch to our bunch of dragons who were some HMRC seniors. Jo Thomson from the ICS was one of our dragons. And they said, look, this is what we think the answer is to this problem that you've given us. You should try doing this. We did the following. But actually, given the fact that we'd said, look, this is a Chatham House environment, there was a lot of back and forth. So we ended up having our dragons then challenging back to some of our pitchers, and the pitchers from other tables saying, well, actually, no, that's slightly wrong. You shouldn't have done it like that. But actually, it made for a really good, free-flowing, kind of open discussion. We had found with a more traditional sort of forum or round table, people tended to come with quite a polished,
Yes.
here's a bit of a presentation piece. I want to show the best of what we, our organization, our individuals have done. They'd have some nice slides maybe, and it all looked very good. And you think, wow, everyone's doing amazing things everywhere. That's so great. Whereas this type of environment, there was a lot more back and forth. We got to hear a lot more. And, it was really fast paced. It was really dynamic. It was quite hard capturing all of the outputs. We had people scribbling furiously across all of the tables. But yeah, I think that approach, it meant we got to hear a lot more in a relatively short space of time.
Is there a couple of examples that you could share that either from Dragon's Den or from your travels, Claire, that you listened and acted on an innovation that's just made a difference?
I think it was the Dragon's Den that was the seed of our Voice of the Customer programme. We were hearing from people in the Dragon's Den about how you need to immerse your whole organisation in customers' experiences. And of course, if you've got frontline colleagues, you've got those people who are answering the phones, dealing with post, you've got compliance officers, they're working with customers on a day-by-day basis. But then in most organisations, you have lots of colleagues that don't have that experience. And so some of the pitches were saying, you need to find a way to immerse everybody in how your customers are feeling. And I said to my head of customer data and insight, what can we do? And he came up with, let's roll out a Voice of the Customer programme. So we started with our executive team, where we ran an immersive experience for them in March. We're running another one later this month, and we're going to run one of these every quarter, where we're really going to take the experience of our customers directly to our top team.
So with kind of oral testimonies and that
Absolutely.
are recorded,
yeah,
that they'll listen
recorded
to.
testimonies. So it feels like an immersive experience. But we are committed over this year to driving out this approach to every non-frontline colleague in the whole organisation. So we're talking about thousands of colleagues here who will be directly listening to customers, whether that's because they are taking part in an immersion session, whether it's because they're listening to phone calls, looking at post, working with our complaints teams, talking to our compliance officers. There'll be various options, and we would expect everyone to engage in that.
I can think of maybe a more low-level, less kind of strategic example as well. When we were speaking with the tax authority in Australia, they told us that they have tax dogs, literal dogs that they take out. So it's a more rural society. So they will go and visit kind of county fairs, and they'll have two people from the Revenue Authority take out a dog or two that literally has a thing on its back that says tax dog. The idea being that kids will come over and go, oh, the dog's lovely, isn't it? And they'll give the dog a little pet. And then the parents are like, oh, people from the tax authority. Actually, do you know what? I've got a question for you. I want to know about X. So they discovered, oh, do you know what? Everyone loves a dog. Our comms team, they started using pictures of dogs, in a number of things they put out on our socials, actually recognising it does capture people's attention.
Yeah.
People do respond to, dogs, cats and babies. I do think one of the members of our executive committee did think that tax cats would be better. I think he had a particular slant that was coming, from a different position to everyone else. But yeah, it's a simple, lower level thing. But again, it's something we've learned from others. Actually, if you can capture people's imagination, kind of reel them in a little bit, they might then listen to the messaging behind it.
Do you know what's really captured my imagination, but not in a cute way, in a sort of slightly disturbing way, and I think it's meant to be, is that, have you guys seen that DVLA clamping ad with the yellow triangular clamp, but it's got a kind of man's face? I think he's called Clampy. Anyway, my 8-year-old son and I are a bit obsessed with it because it's a very funny image.
Have you seen our HMRC app campaign?
No,
with the pizza?
No.
Yeah, that's a really creative piece, actually. Nominated for an award, but some really good creative content.
I'll have to look that up while
that
we're
really
talking.
really is driving people towards our app.
Okay.
So if you don't like inanimate objects with human faces, maybe don't look it up, because there is a face in the pizza. But
it's really good.
You will remember it once you see it.
Jo's face right now is something to behold. He's looking
I have
very-
the app.
You don't need.
Maybe I'm not getting targeted.
You don't need to see the pizza face.
Actually, it's now a good time then to say, please download the HMRC app. It's really good. Join
It is very good.
7 million more customers. Join them. Use the app.
Excellent.
So it's that point of the podcast where we go there on technology and digital. And, self-service is a big part of the direction of travel for many public services. However, not everyone finds it easy or accessible. My mum still calls me up and says, I want to send a letter to ... government department. How do you make sure that the push towards digital doesn't leave some customers further behind? And are there any cases where digital services are actually more inclusive and you've really cracked it?
Yeah, really good question. Thank you, Jo. So look, our ambition, just to be clear, is to automate. So we want to take away interactions wherever possible. So if you think about a pay-as-you-earn taxpayer at the moment, that the tax is taken at source by the employer, that is a good experience for the vast majority of customers who are taxed in that way. We want to do more of that. So we're on that journey, millions and millions of customers who are, getting their tax taken at source through pay-as-you-earn. We want to do more. Meanwhile, our transformation roadmap describes digital self-service you're talking about, Jo. And actually, we are super ambitious in this space. So we're talking about 90% of customer interactions will be digital by 29-30. That's huge. But actually, what's really important to us is that we're not just going for a volume target. We are really thinking about good 90%. So what we mean by good 90% is those great, easy to use digital experiences. We're really focusing hard on functionality and quality of those digital services through customer journey management.
You've talked about the voice of the customer program earlier, but I was just wondering in general, because obviously in a large organization, you need to change how staff think and not just the systems they use, although often it takes a lot of getting used to if you change up someone's tech that they're using. But how do you bring colleagues along, particularly those who aren't customer facing?
Yeah, it is such a good question. And I was talking about this subject to one of our brilliant non-executive directors a few weeks ago. And he said to me, driving customer centricity into an organisation is about 20% tech and about 80% changing the mindset of the organisation. Now, I don't know whether those figures are right, but, it gave me a really good indication of the balance there. In terms of the 20% tech, we have investment for this spending review period, so the period until 29-30, to deliver two important tech changes. So one is contact centre as a service, and the other is enterprise customer relationship management. And I do think they are massive game changers in terms of both customer and colleague experience. So that's the 20%, absolutely amazing. And so then driving that change of mindset in the organisation. And actually, I would say in many ways, thinking about all those frontline advisors, they are all putting the customer first day in, day out in this organisation. So to a very large extent, I would say we're already customer centric, but there's always more we can do. So we deliver charter learning. So I talked about the HMRC charter. We deliver that right away across the organisation. We've got the Voice of the Customer programme. Importantly, 10 months ago, we appointed our first Chief Customer Officer. That's Myrtle Lloyd. I think that was a huge statement of intent, actually, that in our top team, we're going to have somebody who is absolutely focused, laser focused on improving customer experience.
And actually, Myrtle Lloyd is a friend of the It's Personal podcast because we had her on back in November 2025. So if anyone wants to listen to our fascinating interview with Myrtle about being a chief customer officer, they can find it on this podcast feed. Just scroll back a few episodes and there it is.
And it was a great interview, thoroughly enjoyable. And I guess just on one final question, if you could change one thing about the whole government and what its mindset is towards customer experience, John, what would it be? And how close do you think we are to getting there?
Okay. Could I maybe have 1.5? Is that all right? So I guess a recognition that everything needs to start from good, positive customer experience. If you get customer experience right, everything should flow from that. And then I guess the half to add on to that is for each department, each agency, each arm's length body to have their own chief customer officer or their own version, of a chief customer officer, somebody whose job it is to drive that throughout their own organizations. Because if every single department, agency, ALB has somebody who is, as Claire said, laser focused on putting customer experience right at the heart of what they do, ultimately, actually, we won't be in a job because there won't be a need for individual customer directorates. Departments will just be doing it naturally.
Well, that's a very nice note to end on. And all that remains for us to say is thank you so much, Claire and John, for joining us. I have, incidentally, while we've been talking, looked at that pizza ad, and I may not sleep tonight, but I certainly won't forget about the HMRC app. So
download
the app. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you'll come back and see us again.
Thank you for having us.
So we've just heard from Claire and John. Jo, what stayed with you?
I think the thing that struck me was the sheer ambition of what they're trying to do. Digitising 90% of customer interactions by 29-30, that's an enormous target. But I thought Claire was really clear-eyed that it's not just a volume target, it's about quality. A good 90%, as she put it.
Yeah, I like that phrase. And I also think that discipline or integrity or whatever you want to call it, rather than just chasing the metrics, that came through in a lot of what she said. And I also found it really refreshing that Claire didn't let the organisation off the hook. When I put it to her that maybe some of the public's feelings about HMRC might just come with the territory because, the tax man is a bit of a bogeyman figure in society, she didn't really accept that as an excuse. And she went further because she brought up of her own accord the fact that HMRC came bottom of the Institute of Customer Service survey, and she didn't have to do that.
And it takes a certain confidence to do that in a public forum, but I particularly liked the fact that they're doing something really pragmatic about it, about building that core dashboard that enables them to understand proper insight across a number of different ways. That's really powerful.
One bit that really stayed with me was John's description of the changes that they have been making to the bereavement journey, and that very vivid image of the huge wall covered in Post-it notes to map the processes involved in supporting a bereaved customer. It was actually quite staggering to hear that even in the 2020s, there's still instances of one civil servant physically walking a piece of paper over to another.
Yeah, and that really illustrates something that we hear certainly in the public sector a lot about how these things just accumulate. Each process put in place for a good reason at the time, but then no one ever stepping back to look at the whole thing.
I once heard in a select committee some official who was being put under the spotlight using the phrase paper-assisted digital, which just makes your heart sink, doesn't it? What on earth is that? Anyway, just to finish, I really loved Claire's point about the kind of wider communication challenge, and that HMRC actually needs to get better at making the case to people that the taxes are directly paying for the public services that they use. And that felt like quite a brave thing to say. And it'll be interesting to see how HMRC pushes that message.
It was interesting, and it was very purposeful and heartfelt. And I thought that although, it's been used a lot in business settings, the drag and dense format John described was a genuinely just clever way of getting people to drop PowerPoint and polish presentations and actually share what's going wrong and as much as what things are going really well. And the Chatham House rules piece that he mentioned was really key to that. Have honest, frank conversations about what they can do better.
Yeah, because people obviously can learn from each other so much better when they are not performing or giving a presentation. Unfortunately, that is all we've got time for today. Please make sure that you all add us to your podcast feed if we're not there already, and do get in touch with any thoughts, experiences, or questions that you'd like to share.
And you can do that by dropping me or Jess a message on LinkedIn.
Or by emailing csw.editor@civilserviceworld.com.
Thanks for listening to It's Personal, and see you next time.